Hey everyone, welcome to my live virtual workshop in partnership with Nike Sportswear. My name is Alexandra Hackett, aka miniswoosh, and I'm a men's and women's wear designer that focuses on sustainable and circular design. I'm originally from Australia, but I've spent the last 5 years living in London. Special shout out to everyone who's joined us, whether you found this workshop through JD or through Nike or through my page. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me on this workshop. So today's workshop has very much been inspired by the new Nike Air VaporMax 20. For me, I really wanted to focus on something that, creating a pattern that was minimal waste for a product that could be made from, almost anything that you have at home. And I was really inspired by the VaporMax in that respect. I also really loved what I do love about this shoe is all of the different textiles and the different trims and finishes. That's something I always look for when I'm picking out, reclaimed materials to rework with is, have they got like really cool features? So I really looked forward to working with that. Another thing that I found really inspiring when I was kind of putting together this workshop was Nike's circular design principles. So there's quite a few of them, but two of them really resonated with me. And those were material choices and waste avoidance. So for me, I've always been inspired by, non-traditional materials, especially those that may have been, originally intended for landfill. I love kind of like scavenging pieces of fabric and textiles, from the streets, looking around my home and finding different things I can work with, because I really find that as a challenge when designing. I think when you design with limitation, you can really get some great thought-provoking design and, design elements that you may never have, initially thought of. I'm also a big fan of pattern cutting. So I was really excited to develop this pattern for you today, which is a minimal waste pattern. Might look a bit confusing when you print it out, but I'm going to take you through all the steps. So today, if you haven't seen, I'm going to be taking you through how to do your own hydration vest. So a hydration vest is essentially a compact sort of, one size fits all gilet, primarily used for running. So I wear one all the time because I've been training for a marathon. So when you're running for like over half an hour, it's good to carry, some water with you. But recently, the hydration vest has kind of become more of a lifestyle piece, a fashion item, similar to the VaporMax. So let's get cracking. We kind of gave you a list of different materials, but I'm going to go through them now. So the first thing that you need to do this workshop with is the downloadable pattern. So this is printable on, A4 paper. All you need to do is print it out, and then you kind of need to attach it. So put all the pieces together. I attach it just with some masking tape, so you can use any tape that you have lying around at home. Secondly, you will need some pins. Any pins will do. You only probably need, 10 or 20, not an entire box like I have. You will also need some bias binding, something that's like a 1 or 2 centimeter width will work. If you don't have that though, even just some ribbon that you have lying around at home, you'll need about 3 to 4 meters of it. You will also need some kind of thin elastic. If you don't have sewing elastic, which this is, honestly, a rubber band would work just as well. Rubber band or elastic band, they both work because you only need a very small amount. You will also need some shoelaces. So maybe you have a pair in, a box that you've got at home, or even just some rope would work, and a pair of scissors. You will also need your fabric of choice. So with this workshop, I kind of wanted to make it completely open to you and what you have at home, whether it's, a set of curtains that you're no longer using, or an old pillowcase, or maybe, an old t-shirt, anything like that. For the workshop today, I'm going to do one out of a shoe bag like so. But you can also do it, I've done some out of a Nike t-shirt. And this one was made out of just a gym towel that I had lying around. So let's get started. Just before I start, just a quick shout out and mention that we will be recording this, and it is going to go live on YouTube after we finish recording. So if at any point, I'm going through a little bit too fast, or you want to rewatch something, you'll be able to go back to that and, rewatch it in your own pace. So once we've got our pattern laid out, As I said, it kind of looks a little bit confusing right now, but I'm going to explain how it fits. You want to place that down on your piece of fabric that you've got. One note to make is that you should be placing it on a folded piece of fabric. So where it says cut on fold on the left side, you want to make sure that you've folded your fabric with the fold on the left. If you're working with something perhaps like a t-shirt, what you can do is you can line up that left side of the pattern with the left side of the t-shirt. If that doesn't fit, or you just want to do the pattern right in the middle of the t-shirt, that's totally fine. You just want to make sure that you leave a little bit of fabric space on that left-hand side. So 1 centimeter should be fine. So just freeform cut that when you do that. So some of you might have already cut out your patterns, but essentially you want to follow along all of the thicker lines. You don't want to cut on the dotted lines because those are stitch or fold lines. So you're going to follow around all of these different pattern pieces, like so. One thing to mention, some of these pattern pieces down the bottom, as you'll see, aren't labeled. That's because these are kind of like free-form pieces that you can do, a multitude of different things with, which I'll take you through right at the end. So here's something I prepared earlier. I have pre-cut all of my pattern pieces. So as you can see, here they are all laying out separately. I'm going to pop these away. Yep. So right now they kind of look a little bit higgledy-piggledy per se, but I'm going to show you how we're going to lay them out, and we're going to put the back on one side and we're going to put the side panels on the other. So firstly, you want to move them aside. All of the pattern pieces are labeled, so you can kind of get a gist, upper back panel, lower back panel, and you'll be able to understand where they go. So firstly, let's put those 2 blank pieces, which we're going to use later, just to the side. Starting with the back, your back panel consists of the upper back, the lower back, these odd-shaped ones here, they go here, and then you've got your back hem panel here at the bottom. For the front, you're going to have your upper front panel here. Then these panels all fit in like this. This up the top. These panels are your back pocket, so they'll be popped onto the back. And then these are your front pocket panels. So, for the workshop today, I'll be going through it on just a domestic sewing machine. I'll be using just a straight stitch. That's the only one I'll use for the whole thing. But you can do this entire workshop, just with a simple needle and thread. It's just going to be a single straight stitch. I'm going to show you guys at home. So if you haven't stitched anything by hand, it does take a little bit longer, but it's completely doable this entire workshop. If you are doing it by hand, I recommend just doing a simple, a straight stitch, which I'll demonstrate now just quickly for you. You want to tie a knot. And then essentially you just want to go in and over, maybe about 1/2 centimeter. And then you want to follow in at that same point and then go up further along. And in that way, you'll just be creating a repetitive string of stitches. It will take a little bit longer, but so if you do, as I said, if you do need to rewatch this and at your own pace, we will be putting it up on live, and I'll put it on my IGTV as well if you want to come back to it. So let's begin. So the first step we want to do is we want to work on the front panels. You want to start by attaching the bottom panels, so this thinner slice to this main pocket. When you're stitching, you want to pay attention to what the seam allowance that we've done is with the dotted lines. So the dotted lines show how much space you should be leaving between the edge of the fabric and your stitch line. When you're working with in circular design and working with minimal waist patterns, there's a lot of kind of shortcuts you have to do, and a lot of that can be hidden in the seam allowance. So when you do traditional pattern cutting, it's you have a set seam allowance, and that's across the board of the entire pattern. But I find that, when I'm working with unusual materials or where we haven't really got that much space, it's kind of good to kind of blur the lines and, work with what you've got. So we're going to start off with connecting these two panels at a 0.5 seam allowance, which again just means you're leaving 0.5 centimeters here. Let's pop on. I'm stitching in a black thread, just so it's easier for you guys to look at. But feel free to do it in any color thread you want. You can match the fabric as well. So that's an example of a 0.5 seam allowance. If you measure that with a ruler, you'll find that it's probably not 0.5 all the way along, but that's completely fine. I mean, we don't need to be perfectionists when we're doing this. And, even maybe if it's a little bit wonky, totally fine. Don't worry about it. You won't even notice that with the final design. You also have the option here to do maybe a top stitch if you want to do some kind of like design detailing, and that will also hold it down a bit. So next you want to attach that upper front panel to the top of this one. You want to take note of that, and it says it's a 1 centimeter seam allowance, so just aim for approximately that. There we go. So that is your front panel. As you can see, I've got a little bit of like an extra excess here on the fabric, but that's completely fine. When we do the final bind of it, you won't even notice that. So don't worry if your sewing's a little bit off, because obviously mine is, and it always happens. So next we're going to add that top panel. Now this is kind of what I was talking about when I was saying there's a lot of fabric hidden in seam allowances, and that's a really good trick when you're doing, minimal waist pattern cutting. So with this one, these stitch lines are what you're going to be following when you attach it to that bottom panel. I like to, as a trick when I'm doing this, I like to just take a quick incision on those points, like a 0.5 centimeter, just so you know exactly where your stitch line wants to end up. And then we know that this one is just a 1 centimeter. If at all you ever need to, you feel more comfortable pinning these pieces, that's completely fine. Sometimes it's easier just to hold it in place. So you're going to attach that top piece. And that essentially is your front pattern piece. So that is just one side. You're going to want to redo that for the opposite side, so the mirrored side. When you do that, make sure that you're doing a left and a right panel, because sometimes you end up with two lefts, or two rights, happens to the best of us, but you want to make sure that you're going to get a pair. So let's start working on the back panels now. We can pop this aside. So with the back, we want to start off with that back pocket. So on a lot of hydration vests, you'll see kind of like a patch pocket on the back. It seems like an odd pocket to have on a gilet, but it's kind of for when you're running with a jacket and then you take the jacket off and then you just want to like slip it through the back. Super functional if you just putting something through there. So for that pocket panel, you want to find the one that's the back pocket. Okay. And then you want to fold it out like that. So here we've got the left and the right side of the pocket. I've already bound these, but what you'll need to do is you'll need to bind the edges there. If you don't have any binding, you can feel free to just fold it over and give it a top stitch there. And then you're going to want to combine these two pieces, so fold them back onto each other with the front facing side in together and attach those. And that is your back patch pocket. So because we cut these on the fold, we can now unfold them. It's taking a bit more shape now. And this patch pocket for the back is going to sit right in the middle of that pattern piece, like so. You'll see that this bottom line is kind of a little bit shaped, which is totally fine. That's, as I said, kind of one of the tricks of doing minimal waist pattern cutting. And I wouldn't worry about that. It's definitely not your cutting, it's how the pattern was designed. So you want to pop some pins into that to hold it in place. Just like so. So that panel is ready to go. Then on the bottom, a little bit fiddly, you've got quite a few different smaller pieces. This is kind of one of the advantages and disadvantages of working with, you know, like found materials. Actually, I'm just going to say it's an advantage because I like the result. Sometimes when you're applying a pattern to, you know, an odd shaped piece of fabric, you end up having only kind of remnants left over, and you have to think of, you know, ways that you're going to use those remnants to, you know, add some sort of design element. I always find this interesting because, you know, you have something, you have a problem that you need to deal with, and then from that you make, you know, some design lines that maybe you never would have thought of previously. So you're going to fold out those two corner pieces, and then that back hem panel in the middle, which you just stitch together, goes a bit like this. So we now want to attach these two pieces onto this piece to make that bottom panel there. So you just want to do that on both sides. Cool. So now you can attach that upper, the middle, and the bottom all together. Again, you can do this freeform, or you can pop some pins into it. If I'm going a little bit too quick for anyone, you can just pin this now with me and then return to it later. That's completely fine. So you just pop some pins in and then you can keep up. But again, we are recording this, so you'll be able to rewatch the video at a later stage if you need to. So you want to fold that down over and pin that in position. Honestly, don't be afraid to, you know, use a million pins, because if that makes you feel more comfortable, that's totally up to you. And sometimes you can get way more accuracy if you use loads of pins. So we're going to top stitch both of those. A common sewing machine thing, the needles are always unthreading. Just re-thread that. If you're sewing with pins, make sure that you sew carefully over the top of them so that the needle doesn't break any of them. So that's that. Now let's sew the bottom panel just along here. And that is your entire back panel done. Take the pins out. There we go. Yep, that's the back. So now that we've done the back pocket, let's work on the front pocket. Right now, the front pocket kind of looks a little bit misshapen, but that's totally fine. We are going to show you how to do that. So on the pattern, I've indicated a fold line. This just means the fold at which you're going to incorporate the elastic. You don't have to follow that fold line exactly. You can bring that down much lower depending on the width of the elastic you've got. So if you've got a really thin elastic, you can bring that up to about there. If you've got a thicker elastic, you can bring it down to here. It really just affects the depth of the pocket. So I'm going to use, I've just got a bit of elastic here. So when you're measuring the elastic, kind of just line it up against that straight line at the top. Doesn't matter if you're a little, it's a pretty rough estimate on this. Just make sure it's shorter than the total length. So you just want to cut off a little bit like that. And then you're going to fold it over enough to cover it. Just need to pop a pin in. And then you're going to stretch it over to the other side and put another pin in. Like I said before, feel free to use a load of pins to hold it all in place. So when you pull on both of those bits of elastic, you'll see that it becomes a straight line, and you're going to stitch along that line. There you go. Sometimes when you're working with like alternative fabrics, they can be a bit waxy in texture, or they could be quite thick. When I worked on the toweling one, it was a very thick fabric. So feel free to take these stages really slow, because sometimes the fabric works a bit differently with the machine. So when you sew this, you're going to want to pull it through, keeping it tight. There we go. And that is your front pocket piece. So that's this piece that's going to go right here. It's a little drawstring, little elasticized piece. And once you've done that one, you're going to want to pin that on the position. When you do the two pockets, they're going to be a left and a right pocket. The easiest way to tell between the two is you're going to look at that corner, which has a sharp corner, and you're going to want to match that up with this sharp corner. Then you just want to grab your pins again and start with that sharp corner when you're pinning. The best method for pinning these pieces is to start in the center and move your way out. That means when you take the machine around it, it doesn't get caught on any of them. So you want to pop a few pins in there. Around we go. So you're going to pin those pieces, and it's going to turn out a little bit like this one where you pinned in. Now, I just want to take you through some tips. If you haven't done this out of, an exact rectangle of fabric and you've done it maybe out of a t-shirt, you're going to have a little bit of excess waste around the edge. A really great idea with that sort of waste is to, rather than, throwing it in the bin, think of different ways that you could incorporate that extra fabric into your design. For instance, if you're working with a t-shirt, you might have an extra sleeve. The sleeve is a great thing to use for like an additional pocket on the front because it's got that cover stitch finish. So it's got a literal, loop in there that you can thread elastic through. If you do want to attach this as a pocket, all you need to do is cut down that side of the t-shirt sleeve. And then you're going to want to thread a piece of elastic through that from start to finish. The easiest way to thread elastic is to grab your elastic and then use a safety pin. Any size will work. And just pop that on the end of the elastic. You can then thread it through that loop. Straight through. It'll come out something like this. So now that we've got this, we can attach that here as an additional pocket. Feel free to, like make pleats Sometimes the fabric will be too much for the pattern. Just use a simple, you know, a pleat at the bottom, and you'll be able to incorporate all of that. And again, like I did this piece, all you have to do is pin it around the edge and save it for the binding phase. So once you've done that, you've got your front and your back, and you pin them. Don't worry about the pins at this point. You don't need to top stitch that just yet. You're going to want to add these front panels onto the back panel. Remembering to follow those the stitch lines that were set out. Again, feel free to pin. Go. It will look a little bit odd to be putting them on such an angle, but that's normal. That's what it's meant to look like. And you'll be surprised that, you know, when it looks funny from the inside out, but when you put it on, it fits quite a lot better than it looks. So you want to stitch those lines, and then you've essentially got the basis of your hydration vest. The next stage is the final stage of finishing off the gilet, and that's just to bind all of the edges. So as I said, you know, you can use a 2-centimeter binding if you've got some of that lying around the house, but you can also use a bit of ribbon. I quite like working with ribbon because it's got quite an interesting texture. This is like a gross grain ribbon, which is kind of similar to the one that they have on the back of the VaporMax. But I kind of like working with that because it kind of mixes up and does that like multimedia effect. So yeah, you're going to want to bind around the entire edge of this. It is actually one piece, one singular stitch. So you're going all the way around the edges, back to the bottom. It takes about 3 to 4 meters, so make sure, maybe measure out your ribbon if you've got some before you start. If you don't have 3 meters of, you know, a consecutive piece of ribbon, you can always use different colors and just add them all together, which will create kind of like a nice like patchwork effect. So once you've done that, bring in something I prepared earlier. You'll come out with something like this. This one was done using another Nike shoe bag, but a black one. So as you can see, we've got the binding all the way around the edge. The last final bit is maybe my favorite bit, because it's the part where you can kind of like embellish and kind of use bits and bobs from around the house to kind of finish, you know, the fastenings on the side and on the front. So this is the part where we bring in those little extra bits of fabric that we saved from the start. So we've got 2 little bits here and these pieces here. For my example gilet, what I did is I created little strips of fabric, and then from these pieces, and I made little loops. So if you're going to want to do that, all you need to do is grab those pieces. You're going to fold them like so. And then you're just going to do a single stitch along there, and then you want to cut them in half. So they'll come out a little bit like this. And then, as I've done here on the front, you're going to want to attach them. This is where you can kind of just use your imagination. So you don't necessarily need to do the straps this thin, or you could do more, you could do one. You might choose not to have any straps on the side like this one and just wear it as kind of like an overlay vest. So you want to attach these just here. Again, use some pins just to hold that in place. And then you're going to want to just do another stitch along the top. If you're doing it hand sewing, just hand attach them. Remembering to be careful when you sew over those pins. There we go. Just snip those threads. And then remove the pins. So that's what you're going to see on the side. This is where I said you can use a bit of rope or a shoelace to kind of make that attachment. The great thing about this design is that it kind of fits all sizes. So you can really dictate how loose you want it to fit or how tight you want it to be fit just through this fastening on the side. I had some cool reflective laces that I had. So all you want to do is, if this is the approach you want to take, thread these through and kind of lace them up just like a trainer. And then you want to keep that undone so that you can try it on and see if it fits and then tighten it if necessary. But yeah, this is where, I mean, you could have like a really different like colorful laces that you put in. You could really, you know, play with like that mixed media. You could have a different color ribbon here. You could have different ribbon binding. You know, you can have a really colorful lace. You can really play with, you know, how you accessorize it. So once you've done both sides, you can decide if you want to pop on a front fastening. This is where it really just like rummage through those drawers and, you know, have a look at what you've got at home. Like you might have some leftover buckles. You might have some little key rings that you had, you know, on your keys for your house. You might have, you know, a carabiner. All of these kind of like interesting kind of attachment features that you may not have necessarily seen on many items of clothing. You can really involve them here. So yeah, I did a carabiner on this one, which I really like. If you're gonna do that, you again want to kind of look at that scrap fabric that you've got, all of those little bits of rectangles. And then again, you just want to fold them over like we did before to make a strap. If you've used up all of that already, you can actually just use a little bit more ribbon for that part. And then you essentially want to make a closure on the front. So you'll do the same technique that we did on the side where you just cut off a little bit and then you attach it in the middle, like so. But yeah, definitely go a little bit wild at this stage because, you know, you'll be amazed what you can find, you know, lying around your house. You know, it could be like an interesting peg or something like that. I think that kind of like really adds to this and will really make like these vests more unique and more you. So yeah, that is essentially how you make your own hydration vest. Just another reminder, like we did record this, so I know I went through a few of the steps really fast. Don't worry, you can rewatch this. I will be posting a link to where you'll be able to view it on YouTube later tonight, and you'll also be able to watch it on my IGTV over the course of this week. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys create and what fabrics you work with and how you end up, you know, embellishing it at the end and really seeing your personality. So please, please, please make sure to share your creations on Instagram, and remember to tag me, tag at JDSportsAU, and hashtag miniswoosh live so that I can find your posts. I'm going to be posting a couple of my favorites over this week. But thank you very much. Thank you all for joining me on this live virtual workshop in partnership with Nike Sportswear. Happy sewing!